Welcome to Pray for Micah. And now your host, Micah Chrisman.
Welcome to the Pray for Micah podcast, where we explore art, activism, spirituality, and our cosmic insignificance/significance. I'm here with my friend Josiah Duff, and Josiah is another friend from the University of Central Missouri. Woot woot! Talking Mules. That was my debate team. Just UCM Mules.
Whoa, you were in the... That's crazy. I was on the debate team at UCM.
Really?
Not even kidding.
We must have missed it.
Art, he's the guy.
Oh, man. Dude, Art Reynolds. What a good guy. Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I joined, he was just leaving. It was Jack Rogers who took over.
Tough.
Nikki
Okay.
Freeman. We connected a handful of times and have several mutual friends. And after graduating with a bachelor's in psychology, Josiah moved to Kansas City to pursue a career in customer service and sales. And now he works as a full-time banker and part-time as a pastor. We'll get more into that. Josiah's an Enneagram 3 with a 4 wing. And he's fascinated with things like apologetics, philosophy, economics, personal development, film, music, and art. He's never short on projects, it sounds like.
Gotta keep him going.
Oh, can't leave this out. He's also inspiring writer, speaker, and Christian hip-hop apologist. Artist. We literally just talked about this, that this is a typo.
I kind of like hip hop apologists now.
Well, that's what I was asking him before we started. I was like, is that like Lecrae kind of thing? Like you're just like... You're using music as a medium to do apologetics, and it was supposed to be artist, but maybe he'll stick with it now. After this show.
I like it. It may be on every single bio now moving forward.
Christian hip hop apologist, man. But yeah, dude, sounds like you're working on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, man. It's always grind time, ready to go. But that's a part of my personality. Always got something going on.
What's this church you work for as part-time pastor?
Yeah, so if you're looking for a church home, check out Evangel Kansas City. It's right off of 103rd Street. Shout out to Pastor Jason St. John and his wife Jill St. John. Shout out to Pastor Marcus and Pastor Robbie, Pastor Todd. These are awesome people, and they're running a really awesome.
I'm sorry, they have
organization
to pay
there.
for airtime. I don't do freebies. I make even the Amazon, the bigwigs. They all have to pay me.
Yeah,
now.
who's this episode sponsored by? We didn't even figure that out yet.
Oh man, let's see if we can come up with a sponsor real quick.
Yep.
Probably the two-stepping cloggers.
Two-stepping cloggers
Of the, Texas barbecue swingers club.
That's all right.
That's
Thank you. Shout out to the
two-step
club.
cloggers. I don't even think cloggers do two-step, but that's what this group does. That's what they specialize in.
Thank you.
And they're in Texas, in case you're wondering. If there happens to be a group that exists in that, just know that there's no intention of copyright infringement. I have to do the little. Make sure I'm legally sound with my advertisements.
Exactly.
No breach of copyright infringement. Thanks again. Shout out to those folks. So what do you do
absolutely. there? So I'm the associate pastor for creative arts with the Evangel students. And so this is essentially, I'm working with some of the pastors to pick some music, discipleship with the worship team, stuff like this. And we're pretty excited.
Yeah. Folks don't really know, Josiah and I, we knew each other at college. We went to Campus Christian House, but we had first met, he reminded me, at BSU.
BSU. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I went on a trip with them to Moldova, and there were some good people there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, it was a very impactful missions trip. We did
building some houses and...
No, this was actually something that was already established by a pastor there. And what they do in Moldova, it's I guess one of the highest sex trafficking countries in the world.
Did not know that.
It's 1 out of 5 women will be trafficked in their lifetime in Moldova, something like that.
Ugh, that's tough, man.
So the pastor there, what was cool, what I liked about the setup was that he had all these safe homes where they can bring the women, they can be safe from their predators, the people who are trying to traffic them, and give them yeah, basically a safe
No,
space.
that's awesome. So you were like facilitating that. Were you like in camo with a bulletproof vest? Were you
Oh yeah, I was doing
on the
taken
extraction team?
I was doing taken shit. I was just come with a very specific set of skills or set of skills. There it is. But
Come with me if you want to live. There might be a couple of movies. My bad.
yeah, I was like, oh, that sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But tomato, just,
Liam Neeson.
yeah, white male rage. That's just movies. That's what they call.
All
White
right.
male rage. No, but yeah, no. What we did was they actually just let us stay as guests while we were there, and then he also worked and did stuff with orphanages. The pastor there, so we were doing a mixture of our Bible camp stuff, the things you do as Baptists, but I just remember it being like really just beautiful community. And then the homes that they had for these gals, like they had like their own like greenhouses. They had
right on.
like a hatchery. It's like fish.
So
They could like literally fish
we call
for their
those
own fish.
aquariums where I'm from. I don't. A
Yeah,
hatchery.
maybe
with
I'm
fish.
getting it wrong. Maybe the hatchery. No, I think the hatchery is the fish thing.
I believe you.
And they also had rabbits. I mean, it was just a whole self-sustaining kind of like
Ecosystem type of thing.
And so they could teach them skill sets, but also have a lot of natural resources at their disposal. So I thought it was just a pretty cool setup, but. It's been years. I haven't been to Moldova, and now it's probably going to be attacked and assumed back to the Russian,
Oh man,
Federation.
man, that's crazy. What's happening in Russia right now? Goodness gracious.
Yeah. Our thoughts, prayers go out to people of Ukraine, and hopefully Moldova and other Kurdistan. All these other places are not next on the list.
This is actually one of my very first mission trips was actually to Ukraine, and this was back in I think it was 2013. And it was like an English camp. So I was teaching English as a second language, and then there was a Bible study with that. But I just met so many incredible people when I was over there. The infrastructure is pretty awesome. We were in Kyiv for some time, and I think I can't remember the name of the town that we were in. It's going to come back to me. I'm sure it's going to come back to me. But we were in a small village doing this English camp, and it was just so amazing. I love the experience there. Lots of friends and family.
So are they all okay? You said this was in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Are there people that were there during this fighting going on?
So we were in, we're getting updates from friends and family and pastors that are there. And let's just say that they definitely need our prayers over here. It's grim, but there's still a lot of joy. There's still a lot of joy coming, and that's really what's important, especially during these dark times, is to have some hope and joy coming from some source. And for my friends and family over there, that source is, of course, the hope in God, that He is sovereign, which could open up a can of worms to a totally different conversation. I appreciate that question. In the long run, they are doing well as they can be, but they definitely need our prayers.
Sure.
Yeah, Russia's no joke, man. Russia is a scary adversary for real. So,
yeah, and at the same time, I'm kind of like, they're just taking a playbook. If you think about how absurd the U.S. is, we decided to fight a 20-year war for not an adjacent country. It's not like we just hey, we need to secure more territory in Mexico, so we're going to fight Mexico for it. No, we went all the way to the Middle East.
Yeah,
to two different countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, and I don't know. It's just amazing. I wonder if people had the power to do the sanctions against us to get us to stop doing our wars.
Hey, there's
how
something to that. How would that affect? Yeah, aggressive expansion is never a good thing. That's my opinion. I don't think America was expanding aggressively. I think we were responding to something that happened. And regardless of how you feel about 9/11, and America was attacked on American soil, and so a response was absolutely necessary. Was it too much? For one thing, here's my take on the war on terrorism, and this is just a hot take. The war on terrorism, you can never win, right? You can never win a war on terrorism. There will always be terrorism unless there's tyranny, right? And in a sense, that is terrorism as well. And so I think that we got caught up in an ideological war. And I'm about. There's plenty of things that we can focus on here in the United States. This is kind of where I'm coming from.
Sure.
Yeah. But that's my hot take. Anyway.
Yeah, and I know initially that's how it was when I was a kid. Like, we were all remember where we were at 9/11, unless you were apparently born in like the 2000s.
Yeah, no one was born. No one was born in it.
Like, there's people who are like, you remember 9/11? How old are you? And I'm like, come on. I mean, it wasn't like that long ago. I mean, you were just you're just a young person. You're like a 20-something.
People born after 2000. I'm like, what?
But I remember, going to go feed the chickens, and the pigs, I think, on my farm.
Yeah.
And I'm down there with some buckets of feed, and my mom's just like, Micah, get inside quick. We're under attack. No one, there was just so much chaos and panic. Everyone didn't know what was going on. And so we immediately were like, we got to get some food and water, and we might have to be ready to go in a bomb shelter. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Crazy.
Yeah. The end of the world's happening.
The end is near. Man,
Yeah.
I was, so you were, did you guys go to a shelter or anything like that? Or how did that work? Was there like a town meeting and stuff?
No, I mean, we just ended up watching it on TV like everybody else and just trying to gather more information. And then I think.
So you weren't like in school or anything when it happened?
No, because I was homeschooled. So
no way. Dude,
yeah.
I had no idea you were homeschooled.
Yeah, my whole life, K through 12. What up to all my weirdos out there?
Yeah, dude.
Hashtag pray for Micah. That's a joke.
What if I were to tell you I was homeschooled K through 12?
Really? Wow.
100%.
I think we need to shut this podcast down. I think we're both just too weird. We can't be in the same room anymore.
Two homeschoolers.
No one wants to listen to it. Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense. Spiritual upbringing, homeschool, it all kind of connects. No, yeah.
That's awesome, dude. I had no idea, man. So that explains why you weren't in school. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually wrote I wrote a rap. I wrote a track. It's called Just a Homeschooler. That's the name of the track.
Just a homeschooler.
Just a homeschooler. And it goes, just a homeschooler, too cool for school. So I'm making up the rules. Yeah, I'm making up the rules. And I will never forget. Do you remember the Uptown Arts Bar off of Broadway?
Yeah.
So the very first time I performed this track, I got everybody in the crowd to be like, just a homeschooler, too cool for school. And they'd be like, so I'm making up the rules. Yeah, I'm making up the rules. And dude, it was such a empowering moment for a homeschooler to be like, not socially awkward, but socially awkward on the DL. Yeah. No, it was just a great experience. So shout out to all my homeschoolers.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate the stereotype of just, every homeschooler is not socialized and they're weirdos and stuff.
I mean, let's be honest.
But then we're also a little weird.
Yeah, we've met some weird homeschoolers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I've definitely met my fair share of them. I'm so glad my mom didn't put me in homeschool sports clubs and homeschool like
co-ops,
the dance things. I'm like, yeah, there's these homeschool associations that would have a dance.
Do you remember homeschool conventions? Did you ever go to those?
Nope.
You never went to those?
Nope.
Yeah, we went to a handful. We went to a handful of those. I would disappear. There'd be some chess somewhere, and I'd disappear the whole time just playing chess with a bunch of people. But that was it. This is where you would see people in full uniform, the full homeschool uniform. Their mom knit it together or something crazy like that. My mom tried to do that one time with us. There's my older brother and younger sister, all three of us were homeschooled, and she tried to make us wear uniforms one time. Mom, I love you so much. You have no idea how much I love you. But I was like, yeah, I'm not wearing this uniform. That's a joke. No way. So
you're basically like Ron Weasley getting your sweater for Christmas, a Weasley sweater that was just Mom, I'm not wearing that. Garbage.
Yeah, basically.
Man, well, hey, yeah, homeschooling, and for me, I might crack a homeschool joke here and there on the show, but it was a beautiful experience for me, and it wasn't just about books and reading and writing. It was we did experiential stuff. So we would while everybody else was in school, in October or something, we would take a family vacation to Yellowstone and go to Wyoming and like,
dude, yes.
And we would have basically all these parks to ourselves because no one was there with their kids.
Yo,
and
perks of homeschools.
Mom make us read all the plaques, learn about the guys, she'd go home and write something about it. But it was like, oh, I got to like go and do a field trip that was like a vacation kind of thing.
Dude, yes, 100%, bro. I grew up in Washington, D.C., or right outside of it. So we were at museums all the time in Washington. I remember the Native American Museum in Washington, D.C. That was crazy. They had this immersive like amphitheater, and the visuals would be projected on the walls, I guess, is the best way to. There wasn't a screen. There was a screen up front, but you were able to see. It was very immersive. And that was pretty incredible. And I remember going to there for the first time. But you had like the botanical gardens. You had like tons of Smithsonian's, so homeschoolers, that's where it's at. We had some fun experiences. And I love hanging out with my family all day, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when you go to school, you got to wake up pretty super early.
Right. Didn't have to get up early for my classes.
No, thank you. Right? I'm shuffling to school in my pajamas, son.
We were ahead of the curve because basically, I tell people like everyone's, during the pandemic, everyone's going to home learning and stuff. And I'm like,
done that.
Now it's on the trend. Now everybody gets with it. Like everyone's like, man, we should have been doing this the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, y'all were paying for textbooks. We had textbooks, but now I could do it all online, like it's just. Yeah, good memories. And I've been to DC a couple times we went for the Poor People's Campaign, which was like a whole coalition of like faith leaders, activists, all this stuff across the country.
Yeah.
Shout out to Reverend William Barber. He's a pretty influential person. He started that with Reverend Liz Theo Harris. So if anyone who's watching, check out poorpeoplescampaign.org.
Right on.
And they basically were trying to take up the mantle of MLK, what he was starting, because what I love about the whole vision behind the Poor People's Campaign was like MLK had started it as a call to basically unite cross-divided sectors of people who the powers that be were like, let's just keep black folks over here, poor white folks over here, and make them hate each other.
Right.
This Jim Crow and and so what MLK realized is like, hey, like we're fighting for voting rights. We're focused on, obviously lifting up, black folks and black communities.
Right.
Hey, we need to like realize that there are disenfranchised white people too, who are factories are shutting down and basically help them get over their racism and realize how, our causes are mutual. And so there's a lot of suspicion that like that might've been why he was assassinated, because he was starting to become,
too influential, too powerful.
Right. That he was basically starting to become anti-war with Vietnam and stuff. And so they're like, we can't have all these poor people getting allies to each other. And like in the middle when we're trying to fight a war, again, a made up narrative that was like, it's, democracy versus socialism back then,
No, I'm with you. There's a lot of stuff there. We don't even have enough time to unpack everything that you just talked about. Goodness gracious.
I know. Yeah, sorry, I just went over a big.
Yeah, there's a lot of
40 years of a span of history, but
I do appreciate the sentiment. We're talking about MLK and how he tried to unite, and how he did really unite the poor African Americans or Black Americans and the white Americans, and was like, hey, we actually have a common goal to elevate ourselves. I will say there was a caveat, because Black Americans were trying to elevate themselves socially, economically, but also mentally as well, right?
Yeah.
They had to. He was trying to put worth into the minds of Black Americans, because
I'm a man. The signs, I'm a woman. And trying to like.
After you're called, I mean, come on. After you're treated like a piece of property for centuries, how could that not affect your psyche? Is the point that I'm trying to make?
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
If you're told over and over and over that you're a person and you're treated like a person, the people around you that look like you are treated like a product, then you'll start to believe that you are a product.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, the reason why Black Americans are disenfranchised is because they were cattled like franchises.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And so, man,
Your price is only what we're willing to pay or to put up with, and so yeah, you're treated like a second class citizen your whole life. You have to fight, to get people to just recognize your humanity.
Yeah. And MLK was really trying to do that. And I will be honest, I was actually a big Malcolm X fan.
Yeah.
I remember reading Malcolm X, or the autobiography, and I was just like, wow, he's trying to unite black Afro everyone across continents. And I was really about that. I thought that was amazing. And then I read a book that my dad suggested by MLK, and it was the last book that MLK wrote. Where do we go from here? Community or chaos? And this is after the civil rights movement, after the voting rights, right? So we had marched on Selma and we got our voting rights, and the peaceful protest it was on display at how powerful and effective the peaceful protest was. So this is after we got all those things. And he started surveying wealthy and the impoverished up north and down south. And then he wrote a book. Where do we go from here? Where do we go after we have these voting rights? After we have our word, if you will, we can now speak, be represented for the most part.
Yeah.
And that really changed my mind, because it showed me that MLK had a full perspective,
Yes.
and he was trying to make the African American, the Negro, he was trying to make him whole spiritually, mentally, emotionally, economically. And after I read this book, I'm like, man, he knew it. He and had the right approach to it. I appreciate Black Power.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's the only thing Black Americans do have is Black Power. Unfortunately, that seems to be the case. So I sympathize and I empathize with my Black brothers and sisters 100%.
And we got people here in Jeff City and in different state capitals across the country who are trying to ban critical race theory, something that isn't even being taught in high schools. But they're like trying to quote MLK about it. They're like, I want to be judged not by the color of my skin, but by the conduct of my character. It's like, dude, shut the fuck up. Like you all literally like, let's just. And I appreciate you bringing up about Malcolm X, because it's the same thing. We all just like somehow. Like we solved it, man. MLK solved it already, and we can just quote him and some nice scripture verses.
We certainly have not solved anything. We've progressed quite a bit. I sometimes I get caught up. There's a lot of people in the Black community that get caught up and they say we haven't gone far enough, and they get hung up on the fact that we haven't come far enough, and that's true.
Yeah.
We still haven't had a real conversation about reparations.
Right. Yeah.
America normalized domestic terrorism,
Yes.
and they have not been held accountable.
Yes.
And I say this as a military brat, as patriotic as they come. If there was a draft today, my name would be in the hat, right? Because America has afforded me a lot of privilege, and it's amazing, and I don't take that for granted. But with that being said, we terrorized the Black community for centuries. And there's still no accountability for that. So we haven't had a serious problem. We haven't had a serious conversation about reparations. So what I'm really saying is, yes, we have so much more to go, but we have also come a long way.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think that I talk to a lot of, I talked to a lot of one of my friends, and he's always talking about how we have not come far enough. And I got to remind him, I was like, dude, if we go back 50 years,
Right.
60 years, we couldn't eat at the same restaurant.
Yeah.
There were still like white only water fountains.
Yeah.
And here we are working together.
Even here in Kansas City, I worked for an organization called Communities Creating Opportunity for about a year or so. And one of my colleagues who worked there, she's probably in her 60s,
Yeah.
And she's talking about how, as a little girl, she couldn't shop at the JCPenney store or the downtown. And there used to be a theme park. I can't remember what it's called. It wasn't Worlds of Fun, but it was like the original one they had, South Kansas City. They've torn it down.
Oh, no way.
There was a whole theme park, and, there was only blacks only on a certain day of the month, day. And so, she and just like we think we're so far removed from it. You know, we think, oh, that was just like so long ago during the Civil War era. It's like, you know, look, people, like there are people still alive who, as kids, were put through this. In fact, one of them, also one person of the colleague, was Denise Hartsfield. Her father, Reverend Hartsfield, was like one of the ground like key community organizers in Kansas City for desegregation of schools.
Oh, right on.
And she shared like how hard it was because she was like one of the first girls to go to a kindergarten school as a black girl. And she got picked on, made fun of. And so it is one of those things where, like we think it was a big win back then, right? Like, and there's like, oh man, but do you see what the trauma, like the mental, like you're saying, you're always being devalued, even when you get a win, even when you do desegregate and you're allowed to go to school. Oh, now you just have to suffer generations of this traumatic abuse from white people.
There's a book that my wife is always talking about, and it's not just her. The Whole Brain Child. Are you familiar with this one?
What's it called?
The Whole Brain Child. Well, it talks about trauma being intergenerational. And how that needs to be addressed, and we can't just skip over it. And I mean, I think that's exactly what we're talking about, intergenerational trauma of racism. But we could talk about this forever. We could talk about this today.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to back up real quick and just delve a little bit into your like spiritual beliefs, your Christian beliefs, and so like where do you see that kind of aligning with your stance on like obviously wanting to think about reparations, thinking about social justice, because I don't even back to the whole Poor People's Campaign thing. That was like part of like the current one, anyways. They call it the New Poor People's Campaign. Was like, hey, we want this to be a faith movement that's not just Christian, not just but like an ecumenical movement of Muslims, Buddha, you know, anybody to basically fight for justice. And so I'm just curious. How do you feel like that? Where does that play for you? Yeah,
that's a great question. My Christian belief and how that plays a role in reparations. Well, first let's talk about my Christian belief. Let's talk about that for like a hot second, and then we can kind of.
I'll be nice to you, I promise. As a on the fence, not a Christian anymore.
No, let's jump into it. That's what the people want to see, Micah.
Oh
yeah, they want to see good conversation, so I'm here for it. So my Christian background, I grew up evangelical Christian, but I didn't realize I was an evangelical until much later. I was just, and you know what? I take that back. I didn't grow up an evangelical Christian. I kind of just grew up Christian, going to church, reading the Bible, Awanas, approved workmen are not ashamed. You know what I'm talking?
I know Awanas,
I love that. Vacation Bible school. I was very involved with the church, and I grew up on a military base, and so I was involved with the chapel. I guess that's kind of what it was, and it was very interesting because I got a chance to connect with Catholics because we all used the same chapel. I got a chance to connect with Catholics, got a chance to connect with the Jewish community. And so I grew up very multicultural, being on a military base. I think that I came back to Christ maybe around 23, 24. It was like after college. Throughout college, I wouldn't be the poster boy for Christianity, but a lot of us, no one's a poster boy for Christianity. Or maybe we are, because we show that we are imperfect, but still saved by grace and doing our best.
Sure.
So maybe we're all a poster boy. I don't know. We'll unpack that later. But after college is really when I had to make a decision, like, okay, where's my hope? Is my hope in the Lord, or is my hope in something? Or it's my hope in the Lord, or is my hope in myself? Because that's really the two options. Is my hope in the Lord, or is my hope in somewhere else?
Sure.
And I made the decision to put my hope in the Lord. And that was back in 2015. And since then, I've just been trying to walk in the will of God as best as I can. He's revealed some amazing things to me about my future, giving me some cool initiatives to put into action to build the kingdom. And I'm just every single day trying to bring those things to life. So as far as
and preaching it, like you're a pastor part time. Well,
Yep.
I guess with the students, evangel, the students.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. I guess as far as reparations are concerned, this has to do with justice, and we're going to be split on this. I have a mentor, ironically, his name is also Josiah, and we kind of went back and forth in this and didn't really see eye to eye. He's an awesome Christian man who really he really admonishes me when necessary and makes me think about things that I say or do. So I really appreciate his influence in my life. Either way, we disagree on these things. We disagree on this, and that's totally fine.
On reparations specifically.
Well, on yes,
Or I'm sure other things maybe,
but yes, we disagree on reparations, and he says that's not a Christian ethic, and I don't agree. So there's a book by Timothy Keller. Are you familiar with Timothy Keller?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it's a book on justice and what is biblical justice. And in the Hebrew Israelite culture, if there were someone who was going without, then we would help our brother until he did not need anything. Right? Now this on the head, it sounds like socialism, but it's not. Couldn't be anything further from the truth. Right? Socialism is hardly voluntary. And most of the time it's by force, right? This is more of a genuine love for your brother or your sister when you see them without and you want to help them and you want to bring some elevation. This is kind of where we're coming from. There's a difference between equity and equality. We can dive into this. We'd be here for some time. Ironically, I'm a part of a group with Presbyterian church called it's a Presbyterian church off of Holmes, I think, or maybe it's Warnell. But it's a Micah 6:8. Ironically, it's a Micah 6:8. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God.
Yeah. And
it's this initiative where we're putting on dialogues and everything like this, and we're talking about social justice, biblical justice, and it's really, if we're talking about it, social justice is baked into the gospel.
Yeah.
Now it's not like it's not the gospel, right? We got to be careful. It is not the gospel, social justice, but it is baked into the gospel. They're almost one and the same.
I find it interesting that you're bringing out a distinction there, because I had a similar conversation with another pastor who was wanting to just pick my brain about the social justice stuff, and he actually wanted to ask me about critical race theory and stuff. And he was very much like, the gospel is to say it was from sin. And I'm like, well, isn't racism sin? Isn't sexism sin? And all those things. Yeah, but what about lust and these different things? I'm like, yeah, I get it though. There's a laundry list of quote unquote biblical sins.
Sure.
But I don't know. I just think it's interesting that I feel like the church sometimes feels like they need to do that because the culture, it feels like, oh, that's just like political correctness culture. We're not a part of that. But we are for like black people and we are for like justice. Yeah. But like, it's not part of the gospel or the good news,
I have an influential pastor in my life, and we go back and forth on this sometimes. There's a critical race theory. I have not done enough research on critical race theory to have an informed opinion.
That's pretty much the only time you would study it.
Yeah.
It's literally, it's just a catch-all phrase that it's being inflated with talking about historical racism, basically.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah. I totally understand that. You're just that part I get.
Right.
It's the crazy. The other thing about critical race theory is I could say critical race theory, and you could think I'm talking about something totally different, completely different. Right. Like if I say Black Lives Matter, well, what do you mean by Black Lives Matter? Right. Right. Of course, Black Lives Matter, but there's so much connotation behind Black Lives Matter.
Right. It's become a saturated terminology.
Exactly. So if you say I don't agree with Black Lives Matter, right? Or if you say all lives matter, then you're automatically a racist. Right. I'm like, well, that's not a really good way to have conversation. That's not really a good way to get to what are we talking about? What are we actually talking about? And so if I were to say, hey, I don't really like critical race theory, I wouldn't be able to say that with a straight face. I think that we should be talking about the history of racism and how that affects Black Americans today. I think we should be talking about how America has operated on a porcelain skin standard. We'll say that.
Sure. Yeah. It's baked into, like, people are always like, it's a classism issue. It's like, well, how the U.S. started was your race was your class. That's kind of how they did it,
Bro.
you know. So it's like it's an and. They're both the same thing. It's
Yeah. Your race was your class. That's good.
Yeah.
No, that's spot on.
Yeah, because, like, you know, at one point, you know, my ancestors, the Irish and Scots, were not accepted as white people, but they claimed their whiteness. Same with Jewish folks, Polish people. But again, for those ethnic groups, like, they had to give up their language. They had to give up to fit into the English white dominant society. And then, yeah, it became this whole skin thing where, you know, okay, well, what do we do with these Native Americans, and what do we do with these other people that are, Chinese folks and people immigrating here? Okay, well, we'll just have whole stratification.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the whole
Let's go back to class.
Family Guy thing where he's like going through some security check. One of the guys holding up like skin paint chips or paint cards. Like, okay, yeah, you're in the clear, you're safe. Move on through.
Oh man.
So yeah, backing up though, you were saying that social justice is baked into the gospel.
Yeah. I believe social justice is part of the gospel. I
Yeah.
think when you have a love for your brother, when you have a love for the brother, you look out for his well-being. That's what I believe, right? And if there was a true love for our brother in the United States, we'd be looking out for the least of these. We'd be looking out for those that go without. Now, if you look at Acts, and you look at the book of Acts, and you look at the early church, right? This is right after Pentecost. And you see, man, I can't remember the exact chapter and verse, but you see that when a brother was in need, you sold all that you had voluntarily. I can't stress that enough. Voluntarily, so this person could have what they needed to survive, right? But that was a voluntary act.
Except for Ananias and Sapphira. No. Then God was like, what? You're going to hold out? We're going to strike you dead.
Were they holding out, though?
I don't want to.
Yeah, let's not jump in. Exactly.
But I'm just saying, there's just like, I don't know. Some people are like, the New Testament is not like the Old Testament where God just strikes people dead. Like, read this. Like, these people God killed.
He wasn't playing around during the early church. Peter was like, yo, you see the boys that carried your boy out? They're finna carry you out as well.
Yeah.
I'm done.
So glad God's not doing that today. I would have been struck dead by now, I think, having this podcast.
Thank God for grace. We all would have been struck dead.
But if you think about it, like, yeah, you look at Zacchaeus, right? Like, literally, he was a tax collector who stole money from his own people to pay the Romans, experienced this whole totally love and acceptance from Christ, had dinner with him, was, you know, basically saved. Not like in the I prayed a prayer and received Christ, like changed. And he realized the error of his ways, and so he gave people back their money and some. Like, I can't remember how much it was, like 2-3-fold, but yeah, it says, and so I don't know, I look at that as kind of like reparations too, right? Like, as an example of scripture, possibly.
Yeah,
that,
sure.
Hey, like, an injustice has happened. It's been given to empire.
Yes.
And God's like, hey, I'm going to use this person to restore back what harm he's done, and with interest.
Yes. Know? Man, yeah, 100. That's spot on. That's spot on. And I think there is a parallel there.
See, I may not be a pastor, but I know my scripture. Years of being homeschooled and going to church, you know.
I think if you want to do a serious look into reparations, not from a reputable source, you got to look at Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yeah, incredible.
He was in front of the Senate I think it was maybe a year or so ago, if that. And it's just incredible. And he wasn't a believer in reparations until he started doing the research on the 40 acres, until he started doing the research on like how Black Americans weren't given the GI Bill, right? Yeah. And they couldn't start that process to build intergenerational wealth.
Yes.
As soon as he started doing the research and all this stuff, that's when he was like, yeah, there's been some injustice and something needs to be done about it.
Right.
So if you really want to jump into it, that's where I would start. Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that resource.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think that until we recognize, the damages our society has done, and that's the thing is like, for so long, white people have been able to basically, never have to even focus on their whiteness, right? Like,
Sure.
I've met people who were just like, yeah, I didn't realize I was a white person because I was just the dominant norm of what is skin color wise. No one came up to me and said, "Hey, white person," But now to actually reconcile with our past, it's like, oh, no. You stick your fingers in your ears, la, 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 la. We did. And I get it. It's not that, hey, I didn't personally, Micah, go and destroy these towns or these black businesses, torch them on fire.
Yeah.
I didn't do these things.
Rest in peace, Black Wall Street. Never forget.
Right. But I'm complicit in a system that continues to say, hey, just pick yourself up and make yourself better after we burn down your business. Like, we look at black businesses, they were like some of the thriving strongest during like the 80s, you know what I mean? 70s and 80s.
Sure.
And then banks wouldn't invest and you couldn't get a loan. And it's just
I mean, you're
that
speaking
generational
facts,
wealth. Yeah, just
you're speaking facts. There's a lot of injustices that have been done towards African Americans or Black Americans, and we really got to take a look at it, an impartial look at it. We can't be driven, and this is why I can't really condone Black Lives Matter per se, right?
Yeah.
Here's what I mean.
Are you
by
talking
that.
about the organization or the movement?
Yeah, I have a handful of concerns, is what I'll say, with Black Lives Matter, along with critical race theory. It's kind of birthed from a godless point of view, a godless worldview, and that's my biggest thing. We all know that the leaders of Black Lives Matter are trained Marxists, and this is kind of where they got their community organization experience. And so I have a problem with that, right? Marxism, communism, it's godless. There's a lot of concerns there. The tough
I haven't
part,
read that they're trained Marxists.
they most certainly are. All
right, well,
all the ladies.
Fact check that, Micah.
Yeah. The thing is, they're shining a light where it needs to be shined. They're saying that black bodies have been abused. We got to do something about it. That's not okay.
Sure.
And that part I agree with.
It's systemic, right?
Yeah. And so that part I totally agree with. But it's attached to an ideology that I got some concerns about.
Sure.
That's kind of where my hang up is. If we're being honest, that's where my hang up is.
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that. You know, I may not agree. I'm not sure about them being, the Marxists or whatever, but I think at least we can understand that, hey, they're,
the haves,
like you're saying, they're shining a
have-nots.
light on an issue that needs to be shined on. It became more than just a hashtag related to that situation and became something that people could understand, like just share, and it just exponentially grew on social media because people resonated with it, like, hey, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And the response, and so I don't know, the way I've heard people describe it best is that, the interpretation then culturally was, you're saying only Black Lives Matter. And it's like, no, what we're saying is Black Lives Matter too. Like, that's literally that's all it means. Like, Black Lives Matter too. And it's, so the whole all lives matter. Yeah, all lives do matter. Yes, you're right.
But it's a loaded statement, Black Lives Matter. Just like all lives matter is also a loaded statement, right?
I think we made it loaded statements. I think it's like, when you took it back in its original context, like what they were trying to highlight was like, and why it became this phenomenon on social media and why it went viral is just like this idea, like, hey, this is our stance to say to the world, like, we're done. Like, we're done being abused, and you need to, the world needs to accept that we're here and we exist and our lives matter.
Yeah. Our culture matters, not just for appropriation.
Right. Exactly. Not just, you steal our music. Exactly. And yet, yeah. And then people were just mad, like, no, you should be like, it's kind of like, being like, hey, I'm here advocating for cancer folks, and it's like, but what about people with HIV? Like, okay, yeah, those folks also deserve care and attention, but also I'm over here trying to raise awareness about what we're dying from, or what we're being killed by. And it's cancer, it's racism, it's this cancer,
So when you explain it like that, it makes complete sense.
But I can understand, like, the media and everything, it gets bogged down. It becomes, like you said, loaded, and it becomes this whole.
This is why dialogue is important.
Yeah.
Right? Ask the question, what are you actually talking about? What are you actually trying to say? when you say Black Lives Matter.
Right, because what people were saying is like, oh, you're saying only your lives matter and the police suck and we should kill police. Like, no.
Yeah.
There might be radicals who feel that way, that are like, let's kill police officers. No, that's not the majority and that's not even the people who, with the original hashtag and stuff, and who started the foundation, Black Lives Matter Foundation.
Well, here's my tidbit on the police, and I will say there is a thin blue line. I will say that, and they are on the streets protecting public property, not necessarily lives, but there are some good cops.
Right.
I will say that. There are a lot of bad apples, but there are some good cops. But the whole police force started again, right? And this is not directed towards anyone or anything in specific. But the whole police force started to track down runaway slaves, my dude.
Right.
You know, so like
militia groups, same
right.
kind of, they were formed to be able to form a posse quickly,
Exactly. And so you can't you can't have a real conversation about the police if you don't address what they were originally here for.
Right. You can't have all these diversity trainings, and
there's a lot of people that feel safer without police. I will say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I'm an exception. I'm covered in the grace of God, and so there's a privilege that comes with that. To God be the glory. I recognize that, and that was the first step of me recognizing privilege. If I'm being honest, because I was on the wagon of like, oh, white privilege doesn't exist, and like, it was really ignorance. I didn't really understand it. That's really what it was. And I was like, I'm worried about my own life right now. I'm trying to strap up my boots. Had to go pick some out of the dumpster and put them on and strap them up and pull myself up. Some people don't even have boots, bro.
Right.
Anyway, I'm not even sure what I was on there.
We were talking about privilege, and you feel like your Christian faith, it gives you some kind of privilege, or I would say, it is it is its own privilege too. Like,
yeah, Well, what do you mean by that? How about that? What do you mean by that?
By white privilege or Christian privilege?
Christian privilege, both?
Yeah. Christian privilege, I would say, means like, well, for example, I was talking to a coworker, and we are talking about like what are the standard holidays for his workplace, and Good Friday was a standard holiday.
Sure.
They didn't give off. They didn't get off for like President's Day. I don't know. There was just some other bank holidays that they didn't get off.
Yeah, love bank holidays.
And they gave off for Good Friday. And so like, they don't give off for Kwanzaa. They don't give off for Hanukkah, or any other like religious holidays, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
So it is one of those things where I understand there's a lot of Christians who feel disenfranchised in the media, or they don't feel like their portrayal of being an evangelical is fair. Like, I can see that. I can understand, like, yeah, well, you watch Netflix and half the time a Christian portrayal is like they're the crazy cult starters, or something.
Yep.
They're not looked fondly upon in Hollywood. But from a cultural standpoint, it's pretty much, I mean, even if we do want to go back to the whole 9/11 example, right? Like, okay, suddenly all these like perfectly good American citizens are now in question because they wear a hijab, or they, they do other cultural, religious, ceremonial stuff. They're part of Islam. And suddenly something happens, and then,
now they're the villain.
Christians are automatically like, they don't get that same kind of doubt when a KKK person, killed somebody, or again, I know I'm just saying there's religious fanaticism anywhere, right?
Yes,
and there can be a KKK person who is like,
It
God's
like
given me the power to kill people.
Right. It sounds like you're equating KKK philosophy to Christian philosophy.
No. Well, I'm mainly saying that there are those
but
are
there were
Christian,
a lot of there were a lot of people who were like
Christian
it's not
air
right.
quotes
Exactly.
again, like
major air quotes.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I'm not trying to conflate and say all KK members are Christians or that Christians are KKK people. That's not what I'm trying to do. I mean, my example being that, basically, if a white person goes up and shoots up a school and we find out they were a Christian and went to a church, we don't suddenly ostracize all Christians.
Right.
We don't say, hey, they're religious fanatics who might go and shoot up schools. But we did that with 9/11. We're like, now we need to put these people in name checks, and we need to.
I would say, Man, I don't know if those two things are related. I don't know if they're the exact same, right? 9/11 and a lot of terrorist attacks were a holy war, right? That's why they said that. There's a holy war, and we're commencing it.
But there are quotes from
Kids that go and shoot up schools, like Eric and Dylan, or like the Virginia Tech shooting. Maybe they went to church a couple times. Maybe their parents were loosely connected to the church, but they weren't shooting up a school in Jesus' name.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean?
It's not necessarily an actual apples to apples comparison, but it's just one example of like, yeah, we would look. I've never seen Christians be pooled together to be like ostracized like other religious group, if that makes sense.
Right.
You know.
So you would say that would be Christian privilege, is not being ostracized or getting
It's
bank
part of the
holidays.
It's
and stuff
part of the
like that.
dominant norm. Like my hometown in Blue Springs. You drive down 7 Highway. I shit you not. There's over probably a couple hundred churches from one end of town to the next.
Yeah.
Like within so many mile radius of 7. Like off to the side in the neighborhoods. Like big churches, small churches. Like, I mean, to me, that's just like, we don't have enough housing in America for homeless people. We have so many church buildings that are just, housing 10, 20 people on a Sunday. And I'm not saying they should all be a shelter or something, but it's just like, I mean, that's got to be a privilege,
Hey,
right?
man.
As a religious.
Hey, let's shine the light there, dude.
Yeah.
We have a lot of churches, and the churches are supposed to be there for the least of these.
Right.
Like literally their role to preach the gospel, of course, and equip. They're supposed to equip as well. But at the same time, dude, there are enough churches. If we all band together, like the church in Kansas City, I bet you we could end homelessness.
Yeah, absolutely.
I bet you we could pull enough resources. All the major churches in Kansas City,
Yes.
not even the mom and pop ones. I'm talking about like the established churches in Kansas City. We could, right? It depends on your focus. Our focus at Evangel, we're focusing on orphanages, and we're focusing on getting kids into homes and adoption. And we're doing a really good job. Our numbers came out recently, and we're making a pretty large impact. Evangel is contributing.
That's great.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so it really just depends on what we're focusing on. If we're focusing on homelessness, we can make a dent. If it's adoption, we'll make a dent.
Sure.
With that being said, churches do have a responsibility, because who else is going to do it? The government's doing a poor job, right? I'm still waiting for my anarchist capitalist friends to come up with a plan for the free market to save homelessness, or save the homeless from homelessness, but
Right.
we'll see.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, yeah, that's always the promise of the free market, right? Well, the homeless have a pathway if they just want to take it. It's like the friends
Yeah.
I've met who are on the streets, man, like they had professional jobs for many years of their life.
Yeah.
And then they went through a series of misunfortunate events. Their house burnt down, or they got a divorce, their family died, and suddenly they have, a health, condition.
Yeah.
And then they're
There's so many-
self-medicating because
There's so many factors that contribute to homelessness, man. It's not like, not all of us can just be like, oh, numb to the pain. I got to, get that job in that parking spot and buy my Porsche. No, some people actually have to deal with what's actually happening in reality, right? Your house burns down, you got your whole memories are gone, you know? So that's real.
Yeah. And that's why I think Jesus was so bold when he was like telling people like, oh, you have 2 coats? That second one doesn't belong to you. Like,
You didn't say that. He didn't say it doesn't belong to you.
well, he
said
yeah, he just said if somebody asks you to go a mile, go with them 10 miles. You know, he's like, if they ask for your coat, give them your trousers too.
Yeah.
Like he was saying, like, go above and beyond like what somebody asks you for, because that's like, your riches aren't stored here on heaven, but we have tangled up in the American Christian church, and I don't want to just bash on Christians. It's the whole capitalist system in general that's like, no, I work for the shit, and this shit's mine, and I don't have to look out for my neighbor because they're just making bad choices.
Let's talk about this, Micah. What are you actually talking about when you villainize capitalism? What are you actually talking about?
I would say when I'm villainizing capitalism, I mean, to me, it's like, they're going to have the same mirrored kind of evils on any side, whether it's socialism, capitalism, but there's going to be a select few people who still have all the wealth. So I know it seems like we have a choice in the free market system now, but it's very clear when 1% owns 97% of the wealth, like 98% of the wealth, like the 2% owns 98% of the wealth, or 50% of the wealth.
So
check my math, future Micah.
right. So you're saying it's wrong when a small portion of people control the wealth,
right? I think, or like the false
have the wealth, not even control it, just possess wealth.
I think my issue is that
and I agree with you. If we're being honest, I agree with you. I think where we will like divert paths here is what measurement we're using for wealth. That's where I think we'll start to veer off. What is wealth, right?
Well, and that's the thing is it used to be like, growing up as a kid, like, man, if I ever made $100,000, I'd be so rich. Now that's not that much in the grand scheme of things. Like, you're still at the bottom of the barrel of the rest of American society. I think what I would prefer to see in America is a more fettered capitalistic system, something where kind of like examples that they have in different European countries where it's not a totally 100% free market, where it's like, hey, if you make this excess of money, we will be heavily taxed. And so that gives that force. And I know, again, this could be a whole debate. Well, they'll put in offshore accounts and they'll move the money somewhere else outside the U.S. But the reality is that until somebody takes a stance and it stays in place and it's not just reverted by the next president,
sure.
Until it becomes a long established like policy making, then what happens is like, in these fettered capitalistic systems, like these big corporations, they're like, oh, okay, we could either lose this money in taxes or we can get our employees health benefits. We can funnel that money back into our company in other ways as expenses. But what we do here in America is like, okay, we fight for $15 an hour like we did like in Kansas City for Stand Up KC and all these different groups. Now, that was what we were fighting for 7 years ago, okay? People were they were outraged at us. People at McDonald's don't deserve $15 an hour. And back then, that wasn't enough money. Like, if you're a single parent with a kid in a household, you need to be, back then, the numbers, what we had, was you need to be making $23 an hour just to be able to cover your housing, food, and, like, education for your kid.
Yeah.
Like, that was it. Like, that's
like
questionable.
Education, like, for the kid?
Or not education, sorry. I meant, like, healthcare.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say education. That's assuming, they go to public school kind of thing.
I mean, I see where you're coming from. And being a single parent is pretty tough. I have a couple of friends that talk to me about it pretty often. And it's real. I empathize with them. But, man, there's a lot that goes into that. Economics, again, if you were to raise the minimum wage, there are consequences. That doesn't just, like, people say, oh, there's a minimum wage that's enforced. Yes, that actually affects the economy, not in the best way. Yes, people do get a living wage, if you will. But there are also some consequences that if we were to look at, we may think twice about that. I would also say, and I hate to, like, I don't want to, like, bring this up, but you know what I mean? Working at McDonald's is not supposed to be a career for you.
Well, it's not supposed to, but that's kind of what I mean. Is like it's a side effect of the capitalist system. Like the average age person who works at a McDonald's is between 30 and 40 years old.
Yeah, well, like that's not. I wouldn't say capitalism. I wouldn't say that's because of capitalism, right? Capitalism is a simple transaction of consent. If you say I want to pay you this much money to get this job done, and then I say yes, I will take that. I would take that money. I will work for that. My time is worth X amount.
Sure,
that's capitalism.
Sure.
Right? That's
which I've said, like, I'm fine with a fettered capitalism system where it's like, I mean, obviously, like, it's kind of like we would joke about in speech and debate. Like, people would have this whole critique on capitalism. It's like, and you're speaking your points from your MacBook Pro. Like, at the end of the day, like, I've got these microphones. I've got this, I've got a Mac,
It hits home.
Yeah, like, I buy shit. Like, that's the world we live in, Like, you're right. We live in a world where I need to use money to pay for goods and services. But, when we say, hey, it's the same kind of devaluation of like treating people as like products, right? Like Jeff Bezos, like more than enough money to pay his workers health insurance, to give them like breaks, to give them like, and you hear all the horror stories of people who work in these warehouses. They're running back and forth, breaking their bodies to get packages and stuff to people, and
not taking pee breaks and all that. Like, that is definitely wrong. Let me go ahead and say that, bro. I agree with you. There are plenty of CEOs of companies that don't make Jeff Bezos money, that care enough for their employees to make sure that they're doing all right.
Right, and that's kind of
make sure they're. There's a dude named Simon Sinek. Have you? You know Simon Sinek?
I know Simon.
Yeah,
Golden Circle.
Yeah,
that's the stuff I've watched. Yeah,
dude, I love Simon. He and Start With Why, he talks about tons of companies that instead of cutting their people, came up with an alternative solution so everybody kept their jobs when things were super tough, right?
Right.
Leaders eat last. He talks about this. He talks about that a lot in his book. So you don't have to make Jeff Bezos money to make sure that your people are well taken care of. You kind of just have to care about them.
And I've shared this with people. I'm not against somebody having a shit ton of money. My whole thing is like, yeah, like, well, if we gave Mother Teresa,
what's the definition of a lot of money? What's the definition? Because I feel like if you were to ask somebody in an underdeveloped country what a lot of money is, they'd look at your lifestyle and be like, wow, that is amazing. What I wouldn't give to that. We are privileged in America to be like, if I only made $100,000, that'd be amazing. But if we were to take a trip around the world, which I know you've done,
right,
and ask them, what's a lot of money to you? Bro, we're like $30,000. That would change my life.
Yeah, I get it, because that different economies, different scales of how their money currency works. And so I guess I can only speak to like my context of the U.S. because this is where I'm from. This is where I live. Yeah,
right.
It's kind of like I think it'd be great for everybody in all these other countries in the other world to make more than dollars or pennies an hour,
Everybody would.
And that's like the whole thing is like, that's what I mean by like the whole, the money angry machine that pushes capitalism is like promising everybody this kind of like lottery system that one day you'll make it. And the reality is that, you might be lucky to make a few $1 million in your lifetime. Like the average person, like you that's lucky. Like everything else is generational wealth that has been passed down to these like basically upper echelon people.
Sure.
Donald Trump, these other people who literally inherited their wealth. And when you get to that level of financial like multiplication, it's just compounding for you. Your money's working for you.
Yeah.
And so,
but you got to work it for it to work for you. You know what I mean?
And yeah.
Have you read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki?
No, I argue with my brother, people I know who've read it, but I'm sure there's good things in it. But what did you want to share about it?
Dude, it really opened my mind to how money actually works, and that's there's a watershed moment. There's like before I read Robert Kiyosaki several years ago, and then after I read Robert Kiyosaki, and I've never looked at jobs the same way. I've never looked at income the same way. After that,
right.
I would recommend it to anyone who's just curious.
Sure.
And if let's say you have read Robert Kiyosaki, let's say you're like, oh yeah, I read Robert Kiyosaki, it didn't change my life, then I would Wealth Code by George Antoni. That's the next book it's a series of 2 books. That's the next one. I would it's the same thing except it's just he picks up where Robert Kiyosaki left off and just takes it to the next level. So
let me ask you, because like obviously Jesus and everybody at his time from had their own definitions of wealth and things, but like people always talk about how the things Jesus said or didn't say, right? Like
sure.
There's like this many prayers. I'm just using my hands as like show like a little distance. There's this many passages where Jesus talks about prayer. There's like this many passages where he talks about nonviolence. There's this many passages he talks about wealth. Like just it keeps growing. Like he literally, it's easier for camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And don't worry about tomorrow. The Lord will take care. The things for you. And just the whole idea that money decides, pushes everybody to forget the human being or forget life and be consumed. And that's why he says, hey, don't store up your wealth here on earth.
Sure.
Where moth and rust can...
Moth and rust will tarnish it.
Moth and rust can tarnish it. Store it up where it matters. And that, again, I make money. I'm not out here starving. Very clearly, I'm not starving. And so I'm not against...
Micah's a very healthy man.
Yeah, I'm a healthy man. I got my healthy curves. But I don't know. I think there is a point where I'm of the camp anyways that when you make so much money that... one house isn't enough. You need to have multiple houses. One boat's not enough. You need to have multiple boats.
Sure.
And there's so many people suffering that you've lost the kind of point to life. It's just kind of a consumerist, like, I need the next big shiny thing.
So there's a lot of things here. There's a lot of things that we talked about or that you just mentioned. Man, can we start at the okay. Let's start at, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into kingdom of heaven. Right? Let's kind of just start there. Back in the first century, when this was happening, when Jesus was in his ministry, it was very much a class system, and the wealthy sat at the head of the table, right? This is kind of seen throughout our society now. The wealthy deserve a seat at the table. You can kind of see that. They deserve to get into the club first, or they deserve to run for president or senator because they come from a wealthy family. It's very much like that back when Jesus was on earth. Sure. And so when he was talking about that, it's easier for the camel to go through the eye of a needle than the rich man to go into the kingdom of heaven. His disciples were like, well, how can anyone be saved? Right? How's that even possible? I think Jesus says these type of things to really get us to think, outside of the box. We cannot be saved from our money, how much money you spend, the good works that you do. That's not what saves you. And a lot of people think it does. Mm-hmm. And I think that was Jesus challenging the status quo, the status of wealth, the status of fame, the status of notoriety, or whatever it is, and saying that you have to think a little different.
Absolutely. And what I like about studying scripture from the lens of liberation theology is like, it's not just Jesus who taught these things, but even in the Old Testament, there was literally, Jewish law in the Old Covenant that, again, was understanding the power differential between wealthy and poor. And so, like, for example, I think it's in Leviticus or Deuteronomy, one of those earlier books, where the law was, these are literal Jewish laws that are like, when you're going through your vineyard and you're not to pass a second time when you're picking the grapes, but to leave it for the vagabonds, the widows, the least of these, the people who are traveling through who have nothing, like basically like when you go through your olive grove, do the same thing. Like it has all these different passages where they're literally as a culture deciding together as a collective that, hey, we have enough to go around. Sure. And rather than pick all of the fruit and the harvest pure clean and hoarding it just for ourselves, hey, we have to recognize that one day we might be that person who is a widow or somebody who has to pass through foreign lands and leave some for these people. Yeah. And I think that's, to me, the sentiment that I get when I hear Jesus sharing, like if you have two coats, like give your brother the coat, the extra
leave
coat.
some for the least of these. Yeah, and I totally get that. And I agree with you. We should leave some for the least of these. Man, I'm still stuck on this statement. The camel going through the eye of a needle. Yeah, what about it? Man, I just there's a lot of things here, man. I feel like we're just scratching the surface. I love thinking about scripture like this. If I'm being honest, I'm like, What does this actually mean? Why is it easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle, and then for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven? And
both because it's kind of like it's impossible, right? That's the camels shrunk down, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
With God, all things are impossible, or all things are possible with God. To theologically correct, that was Jesus talking about being born again, right?
Sure.
But
God's not shrinking camels to go through needles, you know. I remember one time as a little kid,
yeah,
I'd heard that phrase.
Which one?
The anything is impossible through God. And,
Yeah.
You know,
with God, all things are
God's,
possible.
yeah. And I was sitting up in a tree, and I was staring at the Monkey Mountains in Grain Valley, which are just basically big hills that we could see from our hill on the farm. Yeah, that's a whole other story of why they're apparently called Monkey Mountains. But I just remember just like holding up my hands, kind of like Luke Skywalker Jedi version. I was like, you know, I can move. If I have faith the size of a mustard seed, I can move these mountains. I was like, God, let me do this right now. Like, come on, lift them up. Like, never mind the houses or people that might be there that might kill. Like, I'm doing that. Like,
cast them into the sea.
But I was like, I want to cast these mountains into the sea, and I want to be able to give God the glory. Like, I don't know. I had this weird picture in my mind that I would do it, and then everyone would just like, who did that? Who used psychic powers to move these mountains in the ocean? It was me, and it was God who did it through me, and like everyone would get saved. Like, well, the imagination of children.
There you go. Innocence, love it. All right. Okay. So I have been thinking about this for a second.
Yeah.
All right. So easier for the camel to get through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven. Why? How is this? But what are we talking about? So if you think about a rich man, they don't really need much of anything, right? If you think about a rich man, like a wealthy man, Jeff Bezos literally can ask for anything, and it will be delivered to him. He probably wouldn't even lose sleep over it.
Right.
So if you have a man who's in this type of position or a woman who's in this type of position, the last thing they need is a savior, right? The last thing that they can comprehend is someone saving them from something.
Right.
And so it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a man to get into the kingdom of heaven, because he doesn't feel like he needs to be saved from anything, because he feels like he is God.
Yeah.
He's like, bro, I can get whatever it is whenever I want it.
Right.
Why do I need a savior? Who do I need to be saved from? So that's my take on it. And
I think that's what's powerful about that is like, even just and fast, you know, to the modern context, modern world.
Yeah.
Like, it's proven statistically that people who are lower income or like middle class and lower basically incomes are more generous, and they give per, like, not just per capita, like volume wise, actually give more dollars to their friends, family, community initiatives than every wealthy person. So like,
not dollar amount, obviously.
Yeah, literally.
Not dollar amount.
Yeah. You know, again, like Bezos and them might give away these millions of dollars, but people,
because they have it to give away, which is crazy. But just give away billions of dollars like that.
But my point is that, and then Bezos, you know, they're one person, but that's what I'm saying. Like, even for the amount of money they allegedly give to these foundations and do things, the everyday Americans who give money that's not put in taxes, right? Me giving you $20 for gas because you're just needing some help today.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, they just did a survey looking at these certain neighborhoods, and they were like, oh, even the rich, wealthy people who gave
I'm really glad you brought that up. I need gas.
Yeah, you need some gas.
I saw that.
You drink your tea. That's what you're getting. I'm broke right now. No, that's one of these days I'm going to give people who come on the show an honorarium, you know, when I'm rich and famous.
Dude,
know.
I thought about bringing you a gift today. Is that weird? I thought about bringing you.
That would have been nice.
Yeah, dude. I'm not going to lie. I thought about it, and I was like, that's weird. I'm not going to. Oh, that's weird. Now I should have brought it. Now I wish I would have brought it.
I don't need gifts. Honestly, this is what I do. When I host people, I host them. So it's like, I want to give them the gift of
Part 2, you're getting a gift, fam. It's already been decided.
But that's just like the truth. Like, people who have more generous, open, giving hearts are, like you said, they're the people who recognize, hey, I need to be saved sometimes, and this person needs help. But when you're wealthy and you're like, yeah, you're just giving millions because you know it's a tax write-off. You know that you can literally just sink it into a foundation that you start, and that money just comes right back into your pocket. Like, it just as an expense, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's, you know, that's the whole reason why Jesus even said, like, to the woman who came in and gave her copper coins and the rich people, he's like, you gave more than these rich people did because you gave out of your poverty.
Yeah.
You didn't give out of your wealth.
Let me ask you a question. Yeah. Do you think Jesus cares how much money you make?
No, I think he cares what you do with it.
So he doesn't care how much money you make overall.
I guess not. I mean, I
So
don't
who
know.
cares about how much money you make overall?
I guess the government does.
Yeah. Exactly. The government cares how
And
much.
that's what I'm saying with the whole this is, and again we might diverge here, but that's why I believe in a federal I think there should be more government involvement in taxing the rich. And again, not tax that hurt the middle class poor, but I think that there should be some that makes people pay their dues, close loopholes, do what you can. I've heard people talk about the flat tax, and if you're a rich person, you had to pay a flat, you'll still pay more than just.
Yeah. I mean, economic theory is interesting. I mean, we could talk about that for some time. There was a time in U.S. history, like early in the 20th century, where our tax rate was super high, like above 80%, above 70%. And what they found was they gained less in taxes. As taxes went up, they actually got less in taxes. Right? So that just tells you how fluid it is. When the tax rate goes up, people don't actually pay their taxes as much as when the tax rate is lower. You actually yield more. And this is just one of these. This is why economics for me is so interesting, because it's really just about human behavior in the marketplace.
Right.
And I find that fascinating.
And I've met religious folks who don't pay taxes at all because they know it goes to the military. For every dollar you give the government, literally, it's just 80 cents or something goes to the military. And so I've met people who've gone to prison, literally these nuns and people who refuse to pay taxes.
Wow.
Because they believed they were so anti-war, so anti killing, that they were like, I shouldn't have to be investing in that.
I shouldn't have to. My tax dollars shouldn't go to something I don't believe in. Yeah,
Right.
I'm behind that 100%.
Yeah.
But they do, right? We all pay taxes, unfortunately.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we do. And the truth is, dude, empires fall, and money, currency is changes, and it gets abolished at some point. It switches to the next thing.
Are you talking about cryptocurrency?
It could be cryptocurrency. It could be, I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be just.
I see that smirk on your face. You're talking about
Oh,
cryptocurrency.
I have no interest in it. I mean, it could very well be the future of what people deem valuable. What's interesting is I don't know if this was in Amsterdam. I think it was Holland.
Okay.
And there's this whole historical thing back in the maybe 1800s. Again, don't quote me. I'm not I tell stories on this thing, and who knows? You all go check it out and see if it's true or not.
Yeah.
But basically, it was this whole tulip craze. Suddenly, everybody in the culture.
This sounds familiar.
Yeah, everybody loved tulips, and they were people were selling tulips, and it was paying for houses kind of thing. It was just something that everybody decided over the span of these so many years was this is our level of high valued item, and everybody's trading goods and services for
Love
tulips.
that. Yeah.
And then one day somebody just is it's a fucking tulip. I don't need a tulip. It has no value to me. And it just collapsed. The whole thing collapsed. And suddenly tulips were just worthless, And so I get it.
Fiat currency.
Right. Right. Yeah. One day it was gold. Next day it was money paying for gold. Now we don't even use money. Now it literally is all digital. So that's why
It's true, dude.
One could argue that cryptocurrency is the future, because at least it's
decentralized,
and it's not funded or backed by any one government thing. And
you could verify it. Dude, I'm interested in NFTs. Are you familiar with NFTs?
Yeah. Non-fungible tokens, for those who don't know what those are.
Dude,
you bought any yet? You sunk any of your life savings into an NFT?
No, I haven't bought any NFTs yet, but dude, I'm just fascinated with the technology, bro. I think it's going to change everything, especially for musicians. Think about it, dude. If you created a piece of art and you sold it to somebody and they sold it to somebody, you get royalties on that.
Yeah.
Right? And the music industry has changed so much. Before it was record sales, and you literally had to go buy a record, and then you'd pay the artist, sort of, right? You just pay the record company and all that other stuff, and the retailer, blah 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 blah. But with an NFT, bro, you can mint it in a way where your royalties are literally created. So if I created a hip hop track, homeschoolers anthem. I think we just changed the name of that homeschool song. It's called the homeschoolers anthem.
Yes.
So if I created that and minted it with an NFT, I could create a smart contract and say, okay, every single time this NFT is sold, I want 10% royalty, and I would get paid 10% royalty for the rest of my life on the NFT, right? So
or at least until for the rest of your life of how long technology exists.
Yeah,
as long as
technology exists.
Yeah, nuclear war doesn't. Barring any kind of end of technology kind of era, I guess.
Yes, yeah, I guess. Right on. That's fair.
My dad's. That's why he still prints out his photos, because you never know when these Google and the clouds will fall down. Like the cloud's gonna collapse one day, and I will have my albums, my printed picture albums.
Hey,
those
smart.
are his NFTs. I have the originals.
This is my non-fungible token.
Forget that cloud stuff. My parents actually just got iPhones, and so I had to teach them how to now it's uploading to the cloud. Well, I don't get it. What if I want to print this? It always comes back to, but wait, it's in the cloud, but I want this to be able to.
I want to be able to hold this in my hand and do some scrapbooking. How can I do that?
Right. God, I love my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Christmans. Thank you for making such an amazing man.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, my mom listens to every episode she's told me.
Right on. Yes.
Both of them. So yeah, they're good ones.
Cherish that.
I was lucky. I've got parent privileges. Yeah, I got.
Bro, there's something to it, dog.
I got some cool parents.
My parents are still together as well, and that in itself is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, dude, thanks again for coming and being on the show.
Yeah, dude.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I kind of forgot to keep track of time, but
we've been talking for a long time.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having good conversation, I guess.
Yeah. Where can we find you online? Is there anywhere we can find your music?
Yeah. If you really want to hear my music, I'm doing a concert next weekend.
Really?
In Sedalia, Missouri.
You'll have to go out a little further because this won't air by the time that show goes, or you have that show.
Gotcha. Okay, never mind.
Because I do it every 2 weeks. I just kind of released one, so it'll be, yeah.
Well, we got some stuff in the works. We got some stuff. I can't really speak on all the stuff in the works, but
sure.
Yeah.
Is there somewhere that we can find you, follow you?
Not right now. Not right now. Like I said, a lot of the stuff is in development. I'm still working on a handful of things. Yeah. Can
we follow you personally? Do you have Instagram or Facebook?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. Josiah Duff. Josiah _ I like puns. I'm not gonna lie. I like puns. That's what I like.
Josiah.
Josiah _ Duff on Instagram. You can follow me. That's probably the best place to keep up with me for now.
Awesome, man. Well, as you all know, you can follow Pray for Micah Pod on all your social media platforms. If you have a question for Josiah, for me, for any of my other guests, you can email it to prayformicahpod@gmail.com. You can also just go to prayformicah.com for all of your streaming and what have yous and whatnots and thingamabobs. And we'll see y'all next time. Thanks for joining me for the Pray for Micah podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe on this channel and follow me on social media. Pray for Micah Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and yes, even TikTok. We'll see you next time.
You are now re-entering the normal world.